Now on BBC4, triumphing over the horrors of war, privation and hardship, stories of romance and heartbreak abound as a brand new series charts the ups and downs of love and marriage in Britain, starting with the first half of the 20th century.
The romantic idea of a happy marriage that would last a lifetime has never been more tested than in the 20th century. This three-part series celebrates the enduring power of an age-old institution that has survived into the modern age of individual freedom and affluence. We begin by taking a new look at marriage during the first half of the century, when the wedding day was often the culmination of a long courtship and finally a proposal.
I arranged to meet her, sat down on a bench and said, "Darling, I've got 25 quid, will you marry me?" And so she became my fiancée.
Life is wonderful when you love.
This was an era when the ideal of romantic love in marriage had to withstand the harsh realities of a world very different to today.
This must be heaven.
Yet many marriages were defined by friendship rather than conflict and strife. Above all else, couples wanted to provide a stable and loving home for their children. This was even true of those who struggled to bring up large families on the breadline.
I did not want a great large family. It was just a case of what God sends you've got to put up with. And God sent me all these kids and I'd got to put up with them. And I brought them up. And I didn't ask God, man or the devil, for help to bring them up. I brought them up myself, my husband and I. He worked for him and I looked after him. So what more could we want?
Despite the separation and tragedy of 2 world wars, most marriages not only survived, some became even stronger. A commitment to see things through, whatever challenges lay ahead, bonded couples together for life in the most powerful way. At the beginning of the 20th century, most girls grew up believing it was their destiny to one day fall in love, get married, and have children. Victorian attitudes to innocence and sexual purity ensured that many girls and boys would remain ignorant of the basic facts of life, as ideals of ladylike and gentlemanly behavior were passed down through the generations. This ideal of romantic love had long been the stuff of popular fiction. Many couples expected to fall in love at first sight, like Diana's mother and father.
He fell in love with her on sight, and I think it was in the conservatory halfway through the dance. He kissed her. Whereupon, of course, my mother, who enjoyed it immensely, she'd never been kissed by anybody, it was terribly exciting, and so she thought, she was so excited and delighted to being kissed by this extremely nice young man, that she thought she was in love with him. She must be, because she'd let him kiss her. And according to my grandmother, that meant she was in love with him.
Convinced that they were in love with each other, Diana's parents were married in 1916, totally unprepared for what was to follow.
She hadn't a clue of what sex was going to be like. And I must say, I think it's quite possible my father hadn't either. So it's quite likely that he was as virginal as my mother was.
It's likely, too, that many of the young single men who volunteered to serve in the First World War were also virgin soldiers. They'd been brought up to believe that a man had to be patriotic and protective towards women and children if he wanted a wife. Diana's parents stayed together for life in an era when divorce was very difficult and dishonorable. Since before the First World War, the suffragette movement had been demanding rights for women as a way to create more equal marriages and a more equal and better world. And although most women over 30 would gain the vote in 1918, social changes were slow in coming. Many accepted their parents would help them choose their husband. In the 1920s, those who lived and worked in the countryside had fewer choices of partner than in the cities. A sweetheart would often be someone met at the local school or at work on a local farm. This was how Marian Atkinson came to fall in love in the remote Roththwaite Valley in the Lake District where she'd grown up. In 1922, she was working as a farm servant when she met her first love.
We knew one another when we were 12. We went to the same school. And when I was 17, I went to this place. And lo and behold, my husband was the horseman there. I always liked him. And he was a big, tall, good-looking bloke. And I used to go into my own bedroom at night. I used to think, I wonder if he lost me out.
After a 2-year courtship, Marian and Bill married in 1924, and their first baby arrived a year later. But this was no romantic rural paradise. Life was hard and dominated by work and constant childbearing. In remote areas, there was little knowledge of contraception and pregnancy, and childbirth was accepted fatalistically. Marian had 6 children in quick succession, yet she still managed to create a stable family life working almost every day with her husband on the farm.
When I found out I was pregnant again, I used to say to my husband, oh God, not again, how are we going to manage? But we did manage.
Love on the dole was even harder to sustain. In the 1920s and 30s, Britain suffered mass unemployment as traditional industries like textiles, shipbuilding and coal mining declined. With unemployment reaching 3 million, the self-esteem of a generation of young men who believed it was their duty to be a breadwinner took a serious blow. Poverty surveys into working-class life in the 1930s revealed one key factor in family survival through hard times: the love and labor of the wife and mother. Her skills in cooking, cleaning, washing and housekeeping were respected in the control she was often given over the family finances. Johnson.
Before May is upon us, let's take a look at wedding styles.
In a time of economic uncertainty, the allure of true love and the glamorous white wedding became even more captivating. But influence. One campaign which helped to define the modern woman's attitude to marriage was the family planning movement inspired by Mary Stopes. She emphasized the importance of contraception in preventing unplanned large families and established the first birth control clinic in London in 1921. Coming from a family of 10, Hattie was determined not to fall into the same trap as her mother.
I knew I was never going to go in for a family that size. So I had to take precautions about becoming pregnant. I didn't want to have a baby before I had saved quite an amount of money so that I could be at home with the baby for at least 2 years after birth.
It was in the countryside that large families remained more commonplace. Here, the benefits of modern family planning took effect much more slowly. But few families grew as large as that of Marian Atkinson in the Lake District. She and her husband Bill raised 15 children. Raised 15 children. Raised 15 children.
Children, when they came as quick as they came to me, got a burden at times. And you used to feel You can't put up with any more of it. I've had enough. I'm going to run away. I've said many a time in my married life, I'm going to run away. And I'd walk out of the back door, and I'd look at the door, and I'd think, well, I've no money and nowhere to go, so I'd better go back in. So what could you do?
This was the 30s image of the ideal family. Suburban, middle class, and built on the solid foundation of a father at work, a full-time mother, and 2 children. But during the economic depression, the love and commitment of comfortable middle-class couples would also be tested to the limit. Taboo about sex before marriage remained as strong as ever, and early sex education films were warning young women
I believe you're only amusing yourself.
men were only after one thing,
All this is a game to you.
and it was the girl who said no that got her man.
I love you.
How many girls have you said that to?
No, Betty, I mean it.
For a new generation of young women like this, prudery seemed old-fashioned, but the serious business of marriage was unquestioned.
The moonlight tonight.
But when war with Germany was declared in September 1939 and conscription was introduced, Britain's young husbands, fathers and fiancés marched off to a war from which they might never return. For some, the last goodbye was unbearable. Love was under threat on all fronts, and nowhere more than at sea. The deadly menace of German U-boats meant 1 in 4 British merchant seamen never made it home. When the war ended in 1945, it often meant a difficult homecoming for partners who had to readjust and pick up relationships again after years of separation. For some, husbands and fathers came home to a country devastated by war. Yet despite this, for the vast majority of married couples, the long wait to meet again would end in a happy reunion with their family. Most, for better or for worse, would stay together for life, creating stable homes for their children. But this wasn't the brave new world families had fought for. Bombing raids had destroyed many homes, which put further pressure on relationships. There was a shortfall of 4 million homes, and many young couples were forced to live with parents and relatives in cramped conditions. Nevertheless, most were so pleased to be home, the simple joys of marriage and family life tasted all the sweeter. Despite a brief upsurge in divorces immediately after the war, marriage soon became more popular than ever before. In the late 1940s and 50s, there was a boom in the numbers getting married, with around 500,000 couples tying the knot each year.
So you're going to get married, are you?
Most couples married in their early to mid-20s. Women who left it much later, or who appeared to have too many boyfriends, were viewed with suspicion. However, marrying the right man was a big decision. The dream of domestic bliss and a comfortable married life in the affluent suburbs was never stronger than in the post-war years. One contemporary survey showed that 71% of British wives were very happy. Showed that 71% of British wives were very happy, and only 4% were unhappy. A steadfast husband, the protector and provider, was part of this vision, as was his dutiful wife at home. There was a new respectability as strict rules about courtship were re-established. Early sex surveys of the late 1940s and early 50s revealed the enduring power of sexual taboos, which restrained many couples from having sex before marriage. And even on holiday, couples were policed by their parents, as Eileen Cook and her fiancé Arthur would discover when they went away together.
we were going to Blackpool, and we'd been courting over 2 years. And could we go to Blackpool for 4 days? Yes. So those days you'd to write and get a letter. So I wrote and asked for 2 single rooms, and she wrote back, did the landlady. My mother read the letter, that's okay. So off we went on the Saturday to this boarding house. Sunday morning, my mother and dad landed. They'd come on a coach trip, came to the hotel, and obviously we'd gone out that for the day. And could they have the tea with us? Yes. And could I go to Arlene's room to get washed? That was to check that I was in a single room, and Arthur's room were upstairs.
The deep sexual longings of many couples would only finally be expressed on their honeymoon. The post-war baby boom grew out of a new spirit of optimism for the future. It was unquestioned that this future would be built around the institution of marriage, leading on to a happy and stable family life. The introduction of the welfare state and the National Health Service in the late 1940s made this life look more promising than ever before. Nevertheless, some of the new babies were unplanned, a consequence of their mother's total lack of any knowledge about birth control. By the late 50s, a new and restless younger generation was growing up much faster. Inspired by modern jazz and rock and roll, they began to enjoy the fruits of affluence in post-war Britain. The new breed of young men and women were more independent and questioning of authority, very different from those who had served in 2 world wars. In the 60s and 70s, the institution of marriage would be questioned as never before. The baby boomers began to rebel against all the traditional values and institutions that had once been held dear. The stage was set for a cultural revolution that would start to transform the meaning of love and marriage in Britain forever.